Bruce Daisley, welcome back to Engaging Leader.
Good to be back again. Thank you very much. Who'd have thought it would happen so quickly again?
Right. Well, it was such a good time. Couldn't wait to have you come back. Now, Bruce, you spent several years at YouTube with Google and, of course, at Twitter. What were some of the specific challenges that you saw at those locations where you were able to overcome and help bring joy to work?
Yeah, I think probably the number one thing that almost all of us are thinking about right now is this challenge of remote working, right? That, we all sort of occupy this conflicted space where we know that the more that people can work remotely, it seems to be this energizing, liberating factor. Maybe it allows us to hire people who otherwise we wouldn't be able to attract, or it enables people to live out the complexities of their home life without work feeling like it can displace it. But the challenge is quite often that you've got that freedom that remote working is enabling. It's one of the dividends of the internet. But then there seem to be a few downsides. I'll give you one example. World Health Organization did some work into people who work remotely. Now, the promise of working remotely surely is that we should all feel less stressed. We should all feel able to do our best work. In fact, the World Health Organization said that stress levels of people who work remotely are 70% higher than those who work
Wow.
co-occupied. Isn't that
Would not have,
crazy?
would not have guessed that.
No, exactly. Right. So let's go and have a look. Why are they feeling stressed? Number one reason they feel stressed is they say they feel that their boss doesn't think they are working very hard. Right. Number two, they say that they fear their colleagues don't like them. Right. So immediately, here's what happens. When we're surrounded with people in person all day, even though you and I might not have a meeting, Jesse, we nod to each other. We nod assent. We might even sort of casually say, how was the weekend? How did you get on at that thing? And it's just these moments of quiet connectivity. And the strange thing is that just eliminating those things, humans are so social. We're so fixated with just checking that we're okay with the people around us, that the absence of those things is sadly filled by sort of anxiety, concern. And so because I don't hear from you, because you don't see me, you don't ask me how the weekend was. And so immediately the evil thoughts that sometimes occupy our empty mind, I start thinking, he hopes my weekend went badly. Of course you didn't. But that's sometimes dark thoughts occupy our minds. In fact, there's some evidence that when we're not thinking of things, generally it's darker thoughts that slip in, and they're the ones we remember. So look, so there's the challenge. What have we got? Number one, we've got something in remote working that we know if we do it well, it can make work better, more inclusive, more productive for all of us. And yet we know that when people are on their own and when people maybe aren't surrounded with colleagues, that sometimes their experience of work is more stressful. So I think this is one of the big, whether it's at Google, at YouTube, at Twitter, or in any company, this is one of the big questions that I think some employers are going to learn to tackle and others are going to find that their workers really suffer from. I've observed, in fact, go on.
Well, this is true even with introverted people. I was just at an
No
event
doubt.
last night talking with a remote worker for a software company, and she's quite introverted. And she said, I never would have guessed that I would be someone who was starving for human interaction. But, fast forward 6 months of working remotely, and here I am.
There was a wonderful book out a couple of years ago, Jesse, called Lost Connections. And ostensibly, this you can get most of it. The author, Johann Hari, did a really wonderful TED Talk. But there was one fact in there which is such a vivid image that it becomes really disturbing. So Johann Hari said that people who live alone and sleep alone, they have these micro wakings every night. Because atavistically, to return to when we were in a cave, when we were on our own, if you were sleeping alone all night, you needed to sort of wake up, these micro wake ups just to check you were safe. And here's the strange thing. When we are on our own, someone who lives on their own will not get as good sleep as someone who lives with other people. I don't make the rules. I think it's brutally unfair, but it's sort of an interesting phenomenon. Why? Because humans innately, one of the things that propelled this extraordinary trajectory of innovation and development that we've seen in the last 2,000 years has been largely our ability to connect, to be social around other humans. And so it seems that even introverts seem to get some of our energy from being close to the tribe and being surrounded with other people. And I think, this is really critical. Introverts, sometimes I'm an introvert, and sometimes we just want people to leave us alone. We're in an open plan office. We just want someone to stop interrupting us. However, the balance seems to be really critical, that we need to make sure that we do get some of our energy, but without it being dominant.
So what are some of the hacks that are particularly helpful for remote worker situations?
Well, let's go through some of those things because they can be really instructive. Sometimes the modern existence for all of us can be fixated with productivity hacks. We read Marky Mark's daily agenda, and he's getting up at 3 a.m. to do his first workout of the day, and he's doing emails by 5, and we can't help but think how depressingly indolent we are for not doing those things. And so we immediately resolve we're now going to wake up with a bulletproof coffee, and we're going to do these, and we become fixated on productivity. But what we're losing along the way is we're losing some of these moments of connection. So let's imagine if we're all co-located in the same office, then one thing that would happen before the PowerPoint was fired up or before the conversation started is that there would be a bit of discussion about, did you watch the game last night? Did you do this? Do you do this? Moments of little bits of connection. So if you're all working remotely, I would say, don't go out of your way to kick off the meeting too soon. If there's a bit of chatter in the room, if there's a bit of laughter on the Zoom hangout of people in different offices saying to each other, how was your day? How was your weekend? Don't make the mistake of thinking this is the bad stuff. To some extent, this is the good stuff. But then in addition, if you do have a team that's distributed from across the 50 states, and you maybe get together once a year, twice a year, then at your peril, open laptops and computers too soon, because those moments of personal connectivity are far more powerful than we give them credit. In the evidence that I was able to explore and the research that I saw, that teams that are completely remote, if they are more intentional about using the time when they get together to feel like they're part of something collective, they seem to do better. It's almost like if you get together once every 6 months and in person you do some exercises where there's a bit of laughter in the room, where there's a bit of team cohesion in the room, where maybe it's just a treasure hunt, a scavenger hunt, and you're looking to do something collectively. What you discover is that those things that you might probably the most critical version of you might say, what good is this serving? In fact, when it comes to the team feeling part of something bigger than themselves, they appear to have a disproportionate benefit.
What about in a situation where you have part of the team that's face-to-face, co-located, and then you've got a few remote workers, that issue where there's some us versus them, I guess. Is there anything that you can do to counteract that?
Yeah, I mean, more than anything else, certainly there seems to be some evidence that that trying to be a little bit analog with our communication at times helps. There was some wonderful research that I saw that looked into, a phenomenon of modern existence, but I guess historical existence too. Couples who are sustaining a relationship living in different cities. And this took about 70,000 couples who were living in different cities. And the researchers wanted to know, so they started the clock at the start of the year, which ones will survive 12 months? And so it was going to give them the secret formula. Why would some relationships survive? The relationships that survived 12 months were the people who phoned each other every day, and they set about talking about trivial things. So it might be you've taken the cat to the vet. It might be that I've done the recycling. It might be that, I've got a guy to come and look at the TV antenna. Whatever it is, talking about trivial things, I suspect because merely that form of connection, that empathetic bond that's created when we talk about trivial things seems to be far more powerful than we give credit. So let's transplant that to our workplaces. Well, if you've got a colleague who's working in the other office, and maybe there's 3 of them in that office and the rest of you in head office, then the more you can try to disproportionately reach out in a human way, it seems to have this bonding effect. It seems to be like laying a band-aid over a potential mishap, something that might go wrong.
One of the things I think that is challenging for me personally in those sort of analog situations is phone calls is the ability to wrap it up quicker. Like when I just want to have as I've been learning the importance of making those human connections, it doesn't have to be an hour-long phone call, right? If I had to give an hour-long phone call to all of my remote people reporting to me every day or every week, that would add up. But it's okay to do a 5-minute call and just learning the sort of like, let's spend 5 minutes. Well, hey, I'm really glad we were able to connect. And it's okay you do that in the office. If you ran into someone on your way to the coffee pot, you wouldn't stand there for an hour talking to them. You would.
And what you're saying is exactly right. Have you ever noticed that thing as well, Jesse, where sometimes when we just communicate in text, we start perceiving motivations and intent that just isn't there. And then the moment you pick up the phone to someone and you hear their voice and you hear them expressing their thoughts just in a verbal way, you immediately have you have that dispelled. You're like, okay, he's not trying to ruin me. He's not trying to destroy me, which is what I was imagining when I was reading that text. He just disagrees with the approach we take. And that human connection, it's so powerful at healing some of the things that mistakenly we might find ourselves walking into. Exactly right. A 5-minute call doesn't have to be a 30-minute scheduled meeting. A 5-minute call can have this magically healing effect. And so that's what I'd say. If you've got a remote team, just getting into the habit. One of the things I've noticed is that some teams, when I was leaving Twitter, we were setting about trying to half the amount of time we had on the calendar. However, one of the challenges that we have is that how will I know if I need to speak to Jesse next Thursday that he will be free at Thursday at 3 o'clock? And so what we do, we turn it into a time on the calendar. And what some people are doing is they're saying, okay, so our team collectively, we keep 2 o'clock till 3 o'clock every Thursday free, but there's no meeting. And we call it our magic time. And in that time, if any of us need to connect, it might be a 5-minute call. No one's allowed to schedule something over that. But if you and I need a 5-minute huddle, just we're talking about the marketing plan for next year, or you and someone else need a quick chat, we all know that that's a little Bermuda Triangle, a little space on the calendar that we haven't allowed anything to live in. And I think, that seems what we're trying to do, it's the reason why the book, I guess, is Hacks, is that what we're trying to do is we're trying to find a way to not reinvent work. I don't think anyone's going to unveil the new version of work anytime soon. But what are the little things we can do to make work feel less overwhelming, less dreadful, less like it becomes this dominant thing in our lives?
I love that idea, the magic time, just once a week, an hour where you don't schedule things. Now, if you had, let's say, a completely or mostly remote work team, would you also think about taking that hour and like having a group Zoom call, like just drop in anybody who wants to drop by?
Yeah, I think, one of the things that seems to bond teams more than anything else, I was really taken with the science of laughter. And in fact, I spoke to the world's leading laughter expert. And he said to me an interesting thing, because he said, what purpose do you think laughter fulfills? I was like, okay, that's an interesting question. Why are you asking that? He said, well, through evolution, laughter fulfills something. So why have we evolved to do laughter? And he said, laughter is very much like a human version of birdsong. He said that laughter forges connections between us. And he said, here's the evidence of this. He went into workplaces and he observed when people laugh. And he said, it's never funny. It's like the situations when people are in work, generally the boss will say something, the team will laugh, or, someone will say something, the team will. And he said, okay, there are moments where it's genuinely funny, but normally in work scenarios, we do it to forge connectedness. We do it to sort of say we're together. And so, he will give examples which are, we'll be in a meeting and someone will say, well, Jesse's turn next, and everyone laughs. It's in itself, it's not funny, but what we're doing is we're demonstrating we're connected together. And so if you've got a team that are completely remote, just making sure that that team feels like there's some levity in their interactions. So it might be that, you make a tradition that when it's someone's work anniversary, that someone does a slideshow of 3 photos of them. Or, it might be that when someone has completed something wonderful, that you make sure that, someone tells a funny story about what went wrong along the way. And trying to bring the professor I spoke to, Professor Robert Provine, he said, make space for laughter. And that doesn't mean that you need a Michael Scott trying to crack jokes all the time, but it's more, if you can be intentional about celebrating that. It might be when someone leaves, you do them heroic departure speeches, or, roast them, or whatever it is. Try to bring laughter into the way your team engages with each other, because based on his evidence, it's in service of us making us feel more connected with each other.
I love that. Yeah, making space for laughter.
Yes.
Well, the book again is Eat, Sleep, Work, Repeat, 30 Hacks for Bringing Joy to Your Job. Bruce, tell us how folks can find out more about you and your work and get a hold of your book.
Well, if you search for eatsleepworkrepeat.com, there's a website there, and you can go along and you can take a look at that. So all of my stuff's there. So the 100 episodes of my podcast, link to my book, and there's a whole load of other stuff that I've done there. I'm also on Twitter, and if you're feeling adventurous, you can add me to your professional network on LinkedIn.
Fantastic. Well, Bruce Daisley, it's been so much fun to have you again on the Engaging Leader podcast. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Let's do it again.